the journey of the last year prepared me well to step into this situation, because although I'm certain I had the skill set, I didn't know how to adequately communicate that skill set. And that's part of like what we're talking about right now. Like, part of the reason we're having this conversation is what I got, by working with you and your team, is the ability to articulate myself in a way that's meaningful, because I don't see it sometimes. When you're the person doing it, when you're the person just getting the work done, you don't always step back to look at it and think like, so yeah, what I do is pretty awesome and somebody is going to want that. But yeah, I think it's a skill to be able to, especially when you just want to do good work, you just want to continue putting your best foot forward, to be able to step back and give a real honest assessment of yourself and your skill set. And that leads you to be able to be really secure in what your value proposition is, because when you do go to approach people, even if it's just to network with them, just to build a connection, you have to be strong in knowing what you bring to the table, and to be able to articulate that in a way where it's clear. Because it's every interaction is a give and take, right? You want to be giving something to somebody, but ultimately you're also getting something back, and it's the same on the other side, right? They want to know what they're going to be able to get from you, even if it's 10 months down the road. They want to know what your value proposition is, and it could just be having someone to talk to about a certain topic, or having someone to bounce an idea off of. It's not about necessarily getting a job or getting anything tangible, but it's knowing what value that person can have in my life, and how it is that we can work together. So I think being strong in that is important. I think that's a thing I've definitely been more cognizant of. I've in-person networked fairly well for a fairly long time, but I don't think I had that pitch down as well. And when you go to other courses that try to teach you how to like create your personal brand, I don't think they approach it in such a useful way that works both digitally and when you're standing face to face with someone. So I think that's equally useful. One of the most useful things came in a very early session. So you have all those questions that you have to answer, and you sit down with your coach and they're like, okay, they give you the questions, you go off, you answer them, you take that little test to tell you what your personality type is, whatever. So you pull all that data together, and then you sit down and you start talking through it, and they ask you things like, but it's not just like what is your superpower, but how do you articulate what you bring to the table. And so the very beginning was it's like building your personal brand, but less marketing-y, if that's even a word. It's more genuinely like, let's get to know you, because you is what matters. Your skills, like there are a million people that could potentially have some flavor of what you can do, but how is it that you show that the collection of things you have is unique? And how is it that you show that you as the person also matter and are unique? And so one of the things Coach Rita and I discussed is we got it down to one of the things I'm really good at is understanding both sides of the client and the technology, building those bridges, and then everywhere I go, when I leave things better than they were than when I arrived. And so in communicating that to really, and not just potential employers, but just to other contacts, that gave them a sense of who I am as a person, which made them understand what the best way to approach me is and how we could work together. And so I think that just from the beginning, like even if I just did that one session, I already would have walked away with gold. So I ended up with interviews like really super early on, which was astounding, right? The timing was pretty perfect. It was really helpful to be asked some of the classic questions, but the other, I think, important thing about the interview prep was identifying what your stories are. What stories are you going to tell? Because it's one thing to answer a question and it's another thing to tell a story. And so that the whole parle concept, I think, was exceedingly useful. And to some degree, I was doing it somewhat organically, but not as methodically. And so when I sat down to be very careful and to put those stories together, I was so much more prepared going into, and even when they asked questions that weren't even in the multi-question interview list, right? Nothing we talked about, employing that strategy worked no matter what they asked. So I think on the interview prep side, it was good to have a person to talk to give you feedback and to have a party that you know was invested in your success. But additionally, to have a strategy, so it just didn't matter. It didn't matter what was thrown at you. If you adopted that mindset and if you cataloged all the different types of stories of things that you've done in your head, it's so much easier to just pull from them. And then additionally, the work on trying to know what kinds of questions to ask back, because I found that I spent almost half of my interview asking questions. I made it a point to not let them do all the interviewing. And I think that also was helpful. And I was pre-prepared with some of the questions that came from the list that you gave me, but also questions that came up that I thought of based on similar types of strategies. You know, how do I connect with these people? Because asking questions tells you a lot about what you're walking into, what you could be walking into, what the people are like, what the culture is like, what is it? Because the JD doesn't always tell you what they want the job to actually be. The JD for the job that I accepted, it looks like, like as we've been talking, the scope of that job is so much more vast. And what they wanted right away, like when you read that job description, it sounds like they were looking for an SVP who just managed people and process. But when I got in there, it was clear that what they wanted was somebody who could do the work, but could manage the strategy. And, you know, in the beginning, boots on the ground, ready to go, and then building up to being that kind of leader. But that kind of leader who's equally comfortable with going, you know what, we are short staffed. I'm going to come and configure that firewall with you. And none of that shows up in the job description. That showed up by asking questions and understanding what it is they really wanted. And I think that's what also made me a likely candidate, because I had more of that kind of skill. And I would have never known had I not asked those kinds of questions. I might have walked out of that interview thinking, maybe I'm not good enough for this job. I feel more confident that it is the right position. It's the right place to go. I think had I had a different experience, it would have been easier for me to say, you know, maybe this isn't the right thing, because when they talked to me about their culture, when they talked to me about what the work actually was, when we discussed communication styles, I don't feel like this is going to be the best place for me. And as I think I said to you before, it wasn't just finding a job. It was about finding the right job. And, you know, obviously we all want to work and we all want to be getting paid, but I think it's more fulfilling to find the thing that's going to be the most value for you and for the company. Because you don't want to step into something, you're there for like 2 weeks, then you're like, why did I say yes to this? And now it's harder to leave. I mean, you definitely can, but it's when you go to interview again, trying to explain like, yeah, I was only in this place for 6 weeks, it was abysmal. That to some degree says something about your ability to suss out what the situation is. It could be completely new, like the place could just be terrible and you just couldn't have known. But I feel like you have the opportunity to suss that out sooner and make the best decisions for you and your career. This is something I'm traditionally not good at. And to be able to think about it in a different way and to think about it not just in raw numbers, but to think like, what is the total compensation? What levers do I have to pull? And you can read negotiation books, but really they just keep telling you ask for more. That don't take the first offer. Like it comes across as aggressive and not collaborative. And the approach that you imparted to me was a much more collaborative approach, which I believe yielded a better result because when we had the discussion, I had the discussion with my recruiter and, she went in, she came back with the offer. I felt comfortable with the offer, but when she came back with a contract, I honestly believe because it was so collaborative and because I was so flexible and understanding, that's why she came back with an extra $10,000 to my signing bonus. So that was, I ended up with a $30,000 signing bonus as opposed to $20,000. And I was thrilled with the $20,000, but I feel like if I had tried to play hardball, she wouldn't have got, like, one, I might not have even gotten that, what I got in the beginning. And I don't think that she would have felt it prudent to go out and get a little bit more for me. And then she additionally said she actually got my role classed higher because they have a lot of tech companies have a classification system that roles come in at. And she got me classed at a role that traditionally is promotion into only. And I think, yes, definitely it was my skill set and my value proposition and, them knowing it's going to be hard to find somebody else. But two, I really think it was that collaborative approach. It made them want to fight for me and not just shut me out. So I think learning that lesson from you and not following traditional guidance, which is just to say no to whatever, and to be focused on the whole of the compensation and not just the base salary, I think was really helpful. I think when you, especially you're interviewing with companies that have a lot of pride in their brand, and this I think will work with any company, but it has the biggest punch with companies where people really love saying they work for this company. I asked every person I interviewed with, from the first day you started to today, how has your feeling about the brand changed, or how is it the same? And every single person said, wow, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that. And it taps into, one, you care about what their perspective, them as the person who is interviewing you, and you care about you also care about the brand. You also, and I think that's even better than saying I'm a big fan of, like, I'm going to Apple. I could say, oh yeah, I love Apple. Apple's the best thing ever. I own everything Apple. But I think it's different when you ask and you want to know how their perspective changes. And I learned a lot in talking to them. Some people said that they didn't really know they didn't own any Apple products until they came in. And even though they're not a huge product buff, they have so much respect for what the company does. And so they have a lot of pride in the company because of the company culture and because of what the company does for the world at large, their engagement with other projects. I had people say they just love Apple end to end and they were just thrilled to come and work there, and they love working there even more after being there. I had somebody saying they didn't even want the job because they didn't even care about the brand, but somebody told them they would be crazy not to take it, and it was the best decision they have ever made. So I think you tap into something about the people that you're going to be working with and something about the company. And I think people love when you ask about them. It's like, it's a personal question that isn't invasive. It's one of the final questions I ask, like in the last two or three. And I would, even if we were running out of time, I'd be like, look, I just have to ask you this one question. And I know it's really corny, it's a little bit cheesy. I fully admit to it, but I think it's really important to know. And everybody loved it. It's the program has a lot of good stuff. It's constantly evolving, and the people really make it. And it's clear that everyone there, everyone I spoke to was personally invested in my success. And I can't say that for any other place that I've looked at. I think it's one of the best decisions I've made for my career.